Welcome back to CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music. I'm your host, Jon Rivers. In 1986, a trio of Nashville backup singers decided to form their own vocal group. Taking their name from the affectionate title given to the best studio musicians, Marty McCall, Melody Tunney, and Bonnie Keene became First Call. When the 1987 Dove Awards rolled around, First Call won the Gospel Music Association's Horizon Award and a Dove for Group of the Year. Irish rock supergroup U2 released the Joshua Tree in March of 1987 and was greeted with a degree of fanfare and press coverage that only a few artists such as Elvis, the Beatles, and Bruce Springsteen had ever before received in America.
Put it behind us now, I can't get over it. Nothing left to remind us now, I can't get over it. They say the time heals every wound, I can't get over it. You thought the worst was over soon, I can't get over it.
Almost completely overlooked in the hoopla surrounding the Joshua Tree was the new release of the self-titled album by the 77, their first for Island Records, the label presently preoccupied with the runaway success of U2. She had written and performed several very popular Christian songs since 1983, including Your Kindness, Bring Me Through, By My Spirit, and Strength of My Life. And now, in a May 1987 cover story, Leslie Phillips sang her swan song to the Christian music business.
Moving slow, 'cause your feet get cold when you feel like the stakes are high. You're insecure, 'cause you're so unsure. Should you leave all you know behind?
Phillips wasn't the only woman leaving contemporary Christian music. Kathy Tricoli announced that she was going to work full-time in mainstream pop music and changed her name to Casey Warner. One of her first credits was as a backup singer on Taylor Dayne's hit, Tell It to My Heart.
I loved the fact that I was getting to sing my faith and travel around, but I think I realized that I was a young believer when I started out. I needed to be a little bit more grounded. I also had a little bit of disillusionment about what the church was all about and church music was about. I also was a club singer from Long Island who met Jesus and, was thrown into the Christian music scene, and I had some aspirations for mainstream music. So between personal and spiritual things and just artistry, for pure artistry, I just kind of left in 86 and went home.
Now I don't care if it's a baby or a tissue block, but if we run out of youngsters, I'll be out of the job. So I did my duty, cleaning up the neighborhood. I blew up the critic real good.
Even though he moved from Sparrow to Myrrh Records, Steve Taylor couldn't outrun the controversy surrounding his new album, I Predict 1990. From the cover design, which was mistakenly compared to a tarot card, to songs like I Blew Up the Clinic Real Good, Taylor was in the thick of it again.
We start off the album with a song called I Blew Up the Clinic Real Good, and it was an obvious satire, and the message of the song was, blowing up abortion clinics in the name of God is ludicrous, and the end don't justify the means. But probably my foolishness was, you have a song title like that, and of course people might miss the point. I don't know if I would have done anything differently, but you do satire, some people get it and some people don't.
Jesus, he meets you where you are. Oh, Jesus, he heals your secret scars. All the love you're longing for is Jesus, the friend of a wounded heart.
By 1987, Wayne Watson already had several albums under his belt and had penned a number of popular songs such as Touch of the Master's Hand and Peace That Passes Understanding. But his smash hit Friend of a Wounded Heart from the album Watercolor Ponies eclipsed most of his other successes and secured Watson's position in the forefront of Christian music. Besides the music from established artists like Michael W. Smith, DeGarmo and Key, and Petra, CCM Magazine continued to introduce its readers to new artists like Stephen Curtis Chapman and Margaret Becker. For those weaned on Christian music, it may seem odd to think of a time when Maggie and Stephen weren't making records. But take our word for it, even the man who's now won 37 Dove Awards was once a newcomer.
I really know how to do the newcomer, kind of new kid on the block thing pretty well. And so it's been kind of hard at times to make the shift, begin thinking of myself as not necessarily the new guy, but the big brother. Or as I've made that shift, it's been a real exciting thing to begin to hear people come up and say, hey, I grew up listening to music. Of course, I slap them and say, don't ever say that again. No, I'm kidding. But I really do feel very honored just by the fact that my music has been able to inspire people that are now making records.
Another rainy Monday. Looks like I'm gonna be late again. Why does the race I'm running never seem to have an end? A day away from Sunday. Feels like I'm already losing ground. Funny sometimes how quickly my emotions get turned around. They're letting me down. I gotta keep my eyes on Jesus through the weekdays. In a world where I really don't belong, I've discovered if I keep my eyes on Jesus through the weekdays, even on the weekdays, he'll make me strong.
Crystal Lewis, the little girl with a big voice, had gotten her start singing in the youth musical High Tops. Then, while still just 15, she hooked up with the rockabilly band Wild Blue Yonder. With Beyond the Charade, Crystal Lewis took a big step toward the R&B-based pop sound for which she's known today.
If you see the light ahead of you, and you don't like what you're going through, if you don't want to wear the devil's crown, break down.
George Bush was elected president in 1988. Pop singer turned actress Cher collected an Oscar. And the next day, her ex-husband, Sonny Bono, was elected mayor of Palm Springs, California. And rock and roll legend Roy Orbison died at age 52. The Christian music world was stunned in February 1988 when evangelist Jimmy Swaggart was photographed with a prostitute. and confessed on a number of television shows to sexual sin. The Benson Company ceased distribution of Swaggart's albums, and Swaggart halted, at least for a time, his unflagging criticism of contemporary Christian music. At the 1988 Dove Awards, BB and CeCe Winans were named New Artist of the Year. In preparation for its 10th birthday, CCM Magazine published a special anniversary issue in June. The magazine revisited a number of the pioneers who had launched the musical genre known as contemporary Christian, including Larry Norman, Bill Gaither, Barry McGuire, Andre Crouch, and the second chapter of Acts.
You've hit the ground and you have found pride comes before a stumble. The bigger you are, the harder you fall. Don't harden your heart when you hear him call. Humble yourself before the Lord. Humble yourself.
This was Second Chapter's first interview for CCM Magazine. In it, they announced that after 15 years, they would no longer continue their concert ministry.
Lead me on to a place where the river runs into your keeping. Oh, lead me on, the way to deliverance comforts the seeking.
The biggest news that summer once again involved Amy Grant. Amy's new album, Lead Me On, became the first album by a contemporary Christian artist to ship 500,000 units, qualifying for gold certification the week of its release.
When he rolls up the sleeves, he ain't just putting on the Ritz. Our God is an awesome God. There's thunder in his footsteps and lightning in his fists. Our God is an awesome God. And the Lord wasn't joking when he kicked him out of Eden. It wasn't for no reason that he shed his blood. His return is very close, and so you better be believing that our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
But perhaps the definitive musical statement of 1988 came from a man still better known as a songwriter than a recording artist. In the fall of 1988, Rich Mullins released the album Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth, which contained a song that endures as a classic of the modern church. Reed Arvin, the producer of Winds of Heaven, says he was astounded by the response to Awesome God.
I had heard that there were people singing it in churches before the record came out. And I couldn't figure out how that happened. I mean, that song literally had a kind of life that was not to do with us. We were hearing stories of it just spreading on its own as a worship chorus. But even before the record was out. But what's funny was that I did play that for the then president of another record company. He looked right at me and said, "I don't get it."
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God. Our God is an awesome God.
Coming up, DC Talk makes its debut. Larry Norman appears on CCM Magazine's cover once again. And Carmen stages a revival that lasts 16 months. All that and more just ahead when CCM Magazine's history of Christian music continues.
Radio. You're listening to 100.7 FM KGBI.
Omaha. Welcome back to CCM Magazine's history of Christian music. I'm your host, Jon Rivers.
From Nashville, Tennessee, the Imperials.
Oh, it's a great, great morning. Your first day in heaven when you stroll down the Golden Avenue. There are mansions left and right, and you thrill every sight. And the saints are always smiling, saying, how do you do? Oh, it's a great, great morning. Your first day in heaven when you realize your working days are through. You'll be glad you were not idle. The time to read the Bible. It's a great, great morning for you.
The Imperials celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1989. The legendary quartet was founded in 1964 by Jake Hess, Gary McSpadden, Armand Morales, Cheryl Nielsen, and pianist Henry Slaughter. Dan Huff was known for his work with Whiteheart, as well as his blistering electric guitar contributions to a number of Christian and mainstream projects. Dan and his brother David, a respected studio and touring drummer, signed with A&M Records and launched the arena rock band Giant.
Thank you for giving to the Lord. I am a life that was changed. Thank you for giving to the Lord.
And 15-year overnight sensation Ray Boltz talked about his recent success, spurred on by the runaway hit, Thank You, a song Boltz wrote for pastors, Sunday school teachers, and other unsung heroes who often labor for the Lord behind the scenes.
Heaven bound. Heaven bound. Don't you know I'm heaven bound? Heaven bound. Reaching for that higher ground. Heaven bound. Don't you know I'm heaven bound? Heaven bound. Reaching for that higher ground.
From the Everybody's Gotta Start Somewhere department, this fascinating news item appeared. Forefront Records' next release will be from musical rap trio DC Talk. The Deaf Boys got their act together at Liberty University of all places. Please tell me in my lifetime I will get to hear Jerry Falwell rapping.
We made that record, sold around campus, and I remember us going, how many should we manufacture? You know, we were all nervous, and Michael said, well, you know, the most I've ever done of my little tape that he made before was like 200. And I'm like, 200, okay. So I called the manufacturing plant, and they're like, you can get the best deal if you do 1,000, you know. So I called back, I talked to Mike and Kevin, I'm like, I think I'm going to do 1,000 of them. And they're like, 1,000? You're crazy, we'll never sell them.
Get away, Jordan. I want you to get away. Get away, Jordan. Get away, Jordan. I want to cross over to see my Lord.
The bright spot for the Grammy Awards in 1989 was Take Six. The a cappella sextet was the first Christian group to receive a nomination for Best New Artist. In addition, their song Spread Love won a Grammy in the jazz category. Also, the first time a Christian artist won in a non-gospel category.
CCM.
Happy for reasons have life. Happy for notions have blue. I see the sky is as blue as the ocean. You say you know it's true.
In April April 1989, the Choir became the first alternative band to be featured on the cover of CCM Magazine since Daniel Amos in 1980. Former Kansas vocalist John Elefante and his producer-songwriter brother Dino launched the band Mastodon in 1989 with the release of It's a Jungle Out There. Appropriately, in the month of America's independence, Whiteheart celebrated the release of what many still consider the band's finest album, Freedom.
I will climb to the top of the mountain on my knees just to be with you. I will ride on the wings of the wind 'cause I believe in you.
In August, CCM devoted its cover and a special section to the growing genre of Christian metal, profiling new bands such as Blood Good and Shout. Vocalist Bob Carlyle and former Sweet Comfort Band leader Randy Thomas celebrated 5 years as allies in 1989. But the two had even bigger success as a songwriting team when country superstar Dolly Parton scored a #1 hit with their song, Why'd You Come In Here Looking Like That?
Well, that's fun. I mean, that's just purely fun to do. It's like play acting, you know. I'm very careful what I write, not to compromise my faith to people who know me, because as an artist, I'm a Christian artist.
I hear you have a soft spot for fools and little children, and I'm glad, 'cause I've been both of those. I shook my fists up toward the sky, and most
Both Russ Taff and Margaret Becker hit high points in their careers with new albums released in the late summer. Taft's The Way Home continued in the introspective direction of his 1987 disc, but with more of a hopeful outlook.
The opening line, I hear you have a soft spot for fools and little children. I'm glad, because I've been both of those. But it's such an honest song to sing about yourself and God's understanding.
now I'm standing on this road. Your hand has brought me to. Your faithful love will lead me farther on.
Becker's Immigrant's Daughter album remains a favorite of fans and critics alike.
I've been thinking about what I've been through. All the good times, all the bad.
I wrote it like I was in like turmoil in my life. I was just going through a lot of things. A friend of mine was dying, and maybe the reason why people relate to it is because there's not a lot of defense mechanism mixed into the whole thing. It's very raw and bare, because I didn't have the energy to sort through, do I want people to know this or do I not want people to know this? I had no idea really what it would mean. I knew that I didn't have the energies to be particularly clean about the album. I just knew that I had to get my thoughts out.
Becker was also a member of the Compassion All-Star Band, who released a live album in 1989 to benefit the relief organization Compassion International. Other members included Randy Stonehill, Phil Kagi, and Rick Kua.
Can't stand too tall when you cross that river. Gonna face it
Carmen released his Revival in the Land album in the fall of 1989. It would debut at number 1 and remain in the top 10 for 16 months. You're listening to CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music. I'm your host, Jon Rivers. As the 1990s dawned, the U.S. sent 200,000 troops to Saudi Arabia. In December, Amy Grant and Gary Chapman spearheaded a drive to get Christian music placed in the hands of U.S. military personnel stationed in the Middle East.
People suffering for reasons they don't understand.
1990 marked the launch of Warner Alliance, a new Christian music division of mainstream industry giant Warner Brothers Records. Among the label's first signings were acclaimed session singer Donna McElroy and David Mullen. Denise Williams, a pioneer in singing Christian pop on her mainstream albums, was the first CCM Magazine cover artist of the 90s. And former Petra vocalist Greg X. Voles, who had just released No Room in the Middle, his first album on his own River Records, chatted with CCM Magazine in January.
There's no room in the middle, there's no room on the fence, no room in the middle, it doesn't make sense to be torn into pieces between darkness and light, to be talking about Jesus, but walking in the night.
After a 5-year absence as a solo recording artist, Mark Hurd released a new album in March 1990. Hurd counted a number of fellow artists among his fans, including Bruce Coburn, who talks about Dry Bones Dance.
I remember playing it at home and thinking, wow, this is really good. I didn't expect this at all. And then when I really got into it, I was driving somewhere in Toronto in city traffic, and it was a summer day, and I had the thing cranked and the windows open, and I was listening to the song Dry Bones Dance and many of the other things on the record, and I remember driving along just laughing my head off. It was so great.
Stephen Curtis Chapman was the April CCM Magazine cover boy. At the 1990 Dove Awards, Chapman was nominated for a record 10 awards and took home 5 Doves, including the prestigious Artist of the Year honor, which for the previous 8 years had been shared by Amy Grant and Sandy Patty.
It was really, honestly, more than I probably had even allowed myself kind of to dream of. A lot of kids say, I always dreamt of this happening someday, but I'm not even sure I allowed myself to dream kind of that big or that far.
David Mullen captured the New Artist Dove in 1990, and Steve Green's album The Mission finally broke the 7-year deadlock Sandy Patty and Larnell Harris had on the Inspirational Album Award.
To love the Lord our God is the heartbeat of our mission, the spring from which our service overflows across the street or around the world. The mission still the same, proclaim and live the truth.
Although Rick Elias wouldn't have his greatest commercial success for several years, the 1990 debut of Rick Elias and the Confessions received a slot on the CCM Magazine Critics list of the top 100 Christian albums of all time.
I walked the road for many miles, a burden on my back. Past every trench, man, and every curve, rode every twisted track, but I still walk miles and miles. Look for you through every trial. I still walk miles and miles.
Rich Mullins explained explained how he wrote one of his most famous songs by saying, I was practicing Bach's C minor fugue, and when I got to where I could play it decently, I just didn't want to quit. Bach's music is way more important than the Christian music you hear now.
Bach said that music was here to glorify God and to refresh the human spirit. And I think that's probably what it does best. There are a few things that are as refreshing, which I think says something about the place of music, which is so ironic to me because music is, of all things, the most frivolous and the most useless. You can't eat it, you can't drive it, you can't live in it, you can't wear it, but your life wouldn't be worth much without it.
Sing your praise to the Lord. Come on, everybody, stand up and sing one more. Hallelujah, sing your praise to the Lord. I could never tell you just how much good that it's gonna do you just to sing anew. The song your heart learned to sing when he first gave his life to you. Well, it goes on and so must the song you gotta sing again. The song born in your soul when you first gave your heart to him. Sing his praises once more.
In the Christian music universe of 1990, truth was stranger than fiction. Amy Grant was forced to bring suit against Marvel Comics over the unauthorized use of her likeness on the cover of a Doctor Strange comic book. Grant and Marvel settled out of court.
It's a hit. Come and join us in the sunlight. You've been sitting in the shade too long. Come and give us a chance to sing you a song.
Crystal Lewis joined the cast of the Nickelodeon cable network show Roundhouse. Petra became the first Christian artist to get the box set treatment with War and Remembrance. The band partnered with Josh McDowell on a giant 1990 tour that would introduce McDowell's Why Wait program to encourage abstinence in teens.
What is the world coming to? Seems like everyone is running from the truth. We just stand up and fight, walk into the light. We're the people, we can do it if we try. I know we can do it. Somebody asked me, why do we have to go through it? It's just the test of our faith. What we're living day to day.
The increasingly popular Winans Brothers were the subject of a September 1990 cover story. Plans were unveiled for the first Young Messiah tour, which would feature Russ Taff, Sandy Patty, Phil Keaggy, Larnell Harris, and the Imperials, under the direction of the legendary Ralph Carmichael.
Take his yoke upon you and learn of him, for he is meek and lowly of heart, and he shall find rest, and he shall find rest unto your soul.
October found CCM Magazine on the streets of Memphis, visiting with Eddie DeGarmo and Dana Key. Dana's solo debut, The Journey, had surfaced earlier that year, while Eddie was about to release his second solo album, Phase 2.
Like the fragrance after the rain. Oh, Jesus, 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 let all heaven and earth proclaim.
The album included a remake of the Gaither Trio classic Something About That Name, which featured Bill Gaither on piano and the voices of Russ Taff and Mark Farner.
Yo, drop the mic, put it down. I had enough of the buff, the way you cuff the mic. I'll tough, you huff and cough and stuff like you was rough. You take a bite out of rhyme like you were rough. Listen, say no more. I have spoken. Set your rhymes in the cast, cause they're broken. You're joking, provoking suckers in the vicinity. I grip the mic for all for infinity. So please be quiet, I'm the boss, you're fired. You need to take a nap cause your raps are tired. You boast the most, I provide a different angle. You hold the chorus mic but still get tangled. Your rhymes are used and abused like bad amounts. Silence, please, you hip-hop chatterbox.
Tragedy struck the Christian music world in October 1990 when rapper Danny D-Boy Rodriguez was shot and killed near his Dallas home. The street poet, as he preferred to be known, was 1 month away from his 23rd birthday.
CCM. My God is doing a brand new thing, but since time began, he remains the same. Faithful, forever to his word and solid. A cornerstone unstirred, but look down through the ages and you will find God doesn't change, but he knows the time. From off to piano and soul to rap, you know, God's with us, so we cannot lack it. So
DC Talk made its first CCM Magazine cover appearance in December of 1990. The trio's New Thang album displayed how rapidly they were maturing, not only in their music, but in their desire to stretch beyond the public's conception of DC Talk as a teeny bopper pop band. Toby McKeon explained.
What we did was we just started focusing on the music and the art that we were creating. I tried my best to create some timeless songs. It was a very trendy roller coaster cart we were riding at the time. Reinventing yourself is the key, and that's been the key for us. You know, let's depend on our art. Let's see if the songs that God has given us that we've crafted, let's see if those can be enough.
to label churches by color ain't nothing but wrong. We're in the same crew, we're singing one song. If you eat God's army, that makes you my king. Yo, our common bond is the father of man. Of all attributes that we should possess, love is in the word ahead of all the rest. No negotiation to love a certain nation. All means all, we no discrimination, boy.
The biggest news of 1991, or any year to date in contemporary Christian music, happened the week of April 27, 1991. We'll tell you all about it when CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music continues.
100.7 KGBI.
Welcome back to CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music. I'm your host, Jon Rivers. 1991 was the year of the Persian Gulf War, the year Magic Johnson announced his retirement from professional basketball because he was HIV positive, and the year Michael Jackson signed a new contract with Sony Music, estimated to be worth as much as $1 billion. Reunion Records announced a distribution agreement with mainstream Geffen Records, which included Amy Grant's first 10 albums, as well as Michael W. Smith's Go West Young Man. Sparrow also tried its hand at launching the more youth-oriented Vario label, while Maranatha Music started its dance pop imprint called Arcade. But that didn't necessarily leave Christian music veterans in the dust. Urgent Records reissued Bob Bennett's Matters of the Heart, while Maranatha did the same for Bennett's debut, First Things First.
Empty nets made full of fish, blind eye see. Didn't you used to work with wood in Galilee? Now he's in the synagogue, telling people they are wrong to live as whitewashed tombs, full of dead men's bones. Some say he is the Son of God.
Charlie Peacock's West Coast Diaries, which Charlie originally released on a series of cassettes, were collected by Sparrow Records into a box set.
Because I started in music so young and was so independent, got married so young, I just refused to let somebody define my life in that way, that I'm only a valid, legitimate, recording artist or musician if I'm on a major label, and that I just have to get up and do what I do, and if I have the finances, put out a little cassette tape and do it. Do what you can do. That's what I sensed would be the right thing to do. That if you're really called to this, you just do it.
One man's got a big idea. Another man comes along, puts some money into it. One boy puts a brick on the ground. Another one comes along, puts one right on top of it. Hey, this is how the work gets done.
And Russ Taff's future involved a look at his past. He released Under Their Influence, a new album of old songs.
Turn your light from heaven. Turn your light from heaven down on my soul. Oh, if you find anything take it out. Straight with me. 'Cause I wanna be right. Lord, I wanna be safe. I wanna be whole.
I just kind of started searching and looking, God, what's down inside here? What is my definite call? What's really down there? What have you put inside me? But I think one of the major turning points was my mother, who has lupus, asked me to put some old songs on tape. But it was just a collection of old songs. Some of them were over 100 years old. Songs that I grew up with, songs that have stood the test of time, and that it's probably one of the most emotional records I've ever made.
In April 1989, Steve Taylor announced his retirement from Christian music in order to pursue a new musical venture with friends Dave Perkins, Lynn Nichols, Wade Janes, and Mike Mead. After a nearly 2-year wait, Chagall Guevara released its first and only album, named by CCM Magazine's critics as one of the top 100 Christian albums of all time.
Following a voice in faithful pursuit, I'm searching my soul to do what I'm called to do. I need your benediction. Where's your benediction? Battling the odds through faces of doubt and fear.
Susan Ashton released her first album in 1991. Rachel, the first all-girl band in Christian music, made their debut. Guardian brought arena rock into the 90s with the release of their Pachyderm Records debut, Fire and Love. And alternative music pioneer Michael Knott launched Blonde Vinyl Records. Though short-lived, the label would release a number of influential albums and pave the way for the success of Tooth and Nail Records. After finally getting long-awaited mainstream distribution for its Circle Slide album, the Choir lost its bass player. But Circle Slide had already earned a place on the CCM Magazine Critics' Top 100 Albums of All Time. Petra remained beloved by CCM Magazine's readers as the veteran band topped the Reader's Choice Awards in April. The band or its members took first place in 8 categories, including Favorite Pop Rock Artist, Favorite Pop Rock Album, Beyond Belief, Favorite Long-Form Video, the Beyond Belief Video Album, and Favorite Song, Creed.
I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, His only Son. I believe in the virgin birth. I believe.
Although not nearly as prestigious as their CCM Magazine Reader's Choice Awards, Petra also received a Grammy for Beyond Belief. Other Grammy winners included Sandy Patty, Take 6, and Bruce Carroll.
I walked that same hillside as I knelt down to pray. He showed me all the wrong I'd done and the price He paid that day. And I rose forgiven. His loss became my gain at the great exchange.
And the awards just kept rolling in. Petra won the first 3 Dove Awards of its 19-year history, including a stunning victory in the Group of the Year category. The Rap Song of the Year went to the Winans, but DC Talk scored its first Dove win in the Rap Album category for New Thing.
Things of this world are passing away. Here tomorrow, but they're sure not here to stay. Things of this world are passing away. So lay your treasure above and start to live for Him today.
CCM Magazine's critics found one more 1991 release to add to their list of the top 100 albums of all time. Big Town, the debut album by Ashley Cleveland. Even though she had long-term relationships with many in the Christian music industry, Ashley explains why she elected to sign with mainstream Atlantic Records.
I didn't want any restrictions on what I wrote about, and I also felt like that in many ways I'm always more comfortable out in the world. There's a buttoned-down nature to the body of Christ that's very much reflected in the music industry sometimes. I mean, there are many people that I love and admire in this industry, and I love singing about the gospel, and I'm very pleased and thrilled to be part of the community of God. But my main criterion was that I just wanted to be an artist with as much freedom as possible, and I didn't want any restrictions. I didn't want to have to write about a specific theme or, have to play in certain places.
Something is wrong with this picture. Inside a twisted frame, I thought I was a new creature, but I feel much the same. Take me walk to the well, taste living water, live to tell of a faithful Father. Get up and walk. Get up and walk. Just go on.
In our next segment, we'll look at the unprecedented mainstream success of one Christian artist. Success that would set the tone for much of what would follow in contemporary Christian music in the 90s. That's just ahead when CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music continues.
1 FM, KGBI.
You're listening to CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music. I'm your host, Jon Rivers. The biggest news of 1991, or any year to date in contemporary Christian music, happened the week of April 27, 1991. It was that week that Amy Grant's single, Baby Baby, went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. At the time, CCM Magazine publisher John Still wrote, "This may be the single most significant event in the history of contemporary Christian music." Amy Grant talks about her feelings on that historical occasion.
I felt like that in a way, bearing in mind that charts are what they are, they're just charts. But it cannot be denied that on some level, whoever had the song that went to number 1 on the pop chart, one musical genre was forced to look at another and say, we have validated someone that you have believed in a long time. And I think in a broad sense, it did change the way that the mainstream music realm looked at contemporary Christian music. There was a certain level of validation.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash. Well, you wonder why I always dress in black, why you never see bright colors on my back, and why does my appearance seem to have a somber tone? There's a reason for the things that I have on. I wear the black, the poor and beaten down, living in the homeless, hungry side of town.
In May of 91, Johnny Cash, often considered the ultimate barometer of cool in the alternative music community, joined with Christian punkers One Bad Pig for a duet of Cash's signature song, Man in Black.
I used to think I knew everything about life. What did I know? I used to think I'd seen everything I could see. What did I see? I had an answer for everything I was at. It was always black and white. It was 1, 2, 3, so easy. Hey, oh no.
The release of her album Braveheart brought Kim Hill to the cover of CCM Magazine in June 1991. And Sparrow Records celebrated its 15th anniversary that month with the release of a commemorative album, Infinite Flight, featuring artists such as Second Chapter of Acts, Barry McGuire, Steve Green, BB and CC Winans, Charlie Peacock, Michael Card, and of course, Keith Green.
I found it hard to believe someone like you cared for me. You put this love in my heart. I tried but could not refuse. You gave me no time to choose. You put this love in my heart.
A bushel of other great CDs surfaced in the summer of 1991. Bill Gaither and the Gaither Vocal Band debuted the Homecoming series, while Out of the Gray released its Charlie Peacock-produced debut.
We were saving money, writing songs, making demos, and we didn't have a plan that we were going to come down and be contemporary Christian recording artists because we didn't know there was really such a thing. So it took a couple of years for us to kind of get in the circle of things, and we got down here, we got jobs waiting tables, and started going to a wonderful church, and our little circle of friends started to grow, and eventually one of our demos got into the hands of Peter York at Sparrow Records, and it was the only offer we ever had and the only one we ever wanted.
And Rich Mullins, who had announced an ambitious 2-album project in March, released the first fruits of that labor, The World as Best as I Remember It, Volume 1. Rich talks about one of his favorite songs from that album.
I think the song that I'm most pleased with the writing of is Jacob and Two Women, because I just think it's the one song where I really kind of went out on a limb and tried to be real honest. And it was after I started trying to read the Bible for what it said instead of what I thought it was going to say. The whole deal is this. If you disobey God, you're going to get burned. And if you obey God, you're going to get burned. But the fire that we go through when we obey is the kind of fire that purifies us. And I think it's one of my best songs, daggone it, even if evangelicals hate it. But, I think I must be wrong because there are so many people who don't get it.
Jacob, he loved Rachel. Rachel, she loved him. And Leah was just there for dramatic effect. Well, it's right there in the Bible. And so it must not be a sin. But it sure does seem like an awful dirty trick. And this guy is just a pedal pressed in the book of a memory of the time he thought he loved her and they kissed. And the friends say, he's a devil. And she says, no, he is a dream. This is the world as best as I can remember it.
Sibling superstars BB and CC Winans were the subjects of a July 1991 CCM cover story. Their new album, Different Lifestyles, was just around the corner. That best-selling record was not without controversy, mostly surrounding the guest appearance of MC Hammer in the hit single Addictive Love. Addictive Love would top the Billboard R&B singles chart a few months later. In October 1991, Forefront Records announced that it signed Audio Adrenaline on the strength of their hit indie single, My God.
Mark and I were in another band called Audio Adrenaline, and Bob Herdman was a friend of ours at college, and he came to us with a wacky idea of a song and said, I'm not real musical, but I have this idea, and I think it would be a great song. And it was kind of combining the rap and kind of a Beastie Boys rock, together, kind of a style.
Just when things seemed to be on an even keel with CCM Magazine and Carmen, John Still's critical assessment of Carmen's Addicted to Jesus album in November set off another wave of unrest between the artist and the magazine.
Well, I wrote this review of Carmen's Addicted to Jesus that was, pretty strongly opinionated and quite negative about a number of aspects of the album, and it really upset and discouraged Carmen, so much so that he really withdrew from any involvement with the magazine at all. And it took a couple of years of dialogue and getting together till finally we had a face-to-face meeting, and it was a long and difficult process, and it was the last record review that I have written for the magazine because it just, at the time I was president of the Gospel Music Association, I didn't realize that my byline in an article carried the weight of being president of GMA and editor of CCM and all that stuff. So he thought I had sort of taken this special opportunity to, nail him, which wasn't the case.
We'll stain your eye, you father of lies and Satan. Bite the dust.
Far more favorable was the assessment of the new album by Michael English, making his debut for Warner Alliance. With the release of her 1991 album Sanctuary, Twyla Paris set a new standard for modern praise music. Paris and producer Richard Souther combined electronic and acoustic samples, strings, world beat percussion, Celtic and Scottish melodies, and Appalachian flavoring to create a completely transcendent worship experience.
People responded in such a way, and people of all ages, because no matter how aggressive the music is you normally listen to, for all of us as Christians, we need, on a regular basis, if not daily, that quiet moment, to let God minister His peace, and to worship Him. I had a friend who, at the time, his favorite group was King's X. He was 21. And he said to me, "This is my favorite album you've ever done." I also had a friend who was 70 years old who said to me, "This is my favorite album you've ever done." And I said,
The joy of the Lord will be my strength. I will not falter, I will not faint. He is my shepherd, I am not afraid. The joy of the Lord is my strength.
In a December CCM Magazine cover story, Charlie Peacock, quite candidly, as was his custom, gave the readers details about Love Life. That album, says Charlie, was an attempt to introduce more mature subject matter into Christian song.
In some ways, it's in an industry that refuses to grow up and refuses to address mature themes or adult themes. I'm not talking about just sexuality. I'm talking about all of life under God's gaze, because we're so bent on doing it for the kids. In reality, music and the gospel, grace, all these fantastic things are for people. They're not just for children.
I want my children to know what is pure, what is lovely, what is right. That the intimate moment is beautiful. That's right. Well, it's a good and right thing for a man to say. Me like a woman, baby, and I love
Coming up, Christian music gets its own dance label. Stephen Curtis Chapman takes the most excellent adventure, and three of Christian music's most popular singers reassess their futures. All in 1992, when CCM Magazine's History of Christian Music continues.